Imagine, for just a second, an unarmed monk back in the year 518 CE. He doesn't have an army backing him, he's not carrying a sword, yet he is about to step foot into literally the deadliest terrain on Earth. He's embarking on this massive mission, way more dangerous than war, heading for a land that was considered the absolute sacred heart of wisdom. Welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's dive into this.
So our monk Song Yun, he wasn't just going on a long walk to fetch some random books. Think of it more like he was sent to India to retrieve civilization's spiritual source code. See, back in 6th century China, under the Northern Wei dynasty, there was this massive, deep fascination with Buddhism. The problem? The translations they were relying on were, well, they were incomplete. They were mistranslated. And honestly, they often totally contradicted each other. So they desperately needed the pure original texts, straight from the source.
And to really get why Song Yun matters so much, we have to compare him to other famous travelers. You've probably heard of Foxian or Xuanzang, but Song Yun acts as this totally crucial historical flashlight. While Foxian saw this really stable Gupta-era world, Song Yun walked right into a period of serious, deep turbulence. He basically illuminated this dark, chaotic gap in history long before Xuanzang did his later survey.
Now, to truly understand the stakes of this journey, we've got to picture the city where he started. Luoyang. This was the Northern Wei dynasty, folks. We are talking about a world completely without printing presses. No digital files, no mass distribution whatsoever. In the 6th century, books were ultimate treasures. A single, authentic, hand-copied manuscript had the sheer, unparalleled power to completely transform the religious understanding of an entire empire.
So what exactly was he after? The mission was incredibly comprehensive. It wasn't just a quick grab and go. He needed to bring back original scriptures, sacred relics, accurate on-the-ground information, and first-hand knowledge of how Buddhism was actually being practiced day to day. Because for the Northern Wei dynasty, India wasn't just, another kingdom on a map. It was the ultimate secret homeland of wisdom.
And the powerhouse behind all of this? The one backing this massive risk was Empress Dowager Hu. She was one of the most influential Buddhist patrons in all of Chinese history. And her logic was pretty bulletproof. She essentially asked, if the Buddha taught in India, why rely on imperfect copies when we can bring back the originals? She's the one who commissioned Song Yun, along with his companion Huisheng, to just abandon the total safety of the imperial court and head right out into the unknown.
Imagine for a moment standing right at the edge of the Taklamakan Desert. Its reputation across Asia was chillingly simple. Enter, and you may not return. Just put yourself in Song Yun's shoes for a second, staring down that terrifying, totally well-earned reputation. To take that first step into the sand meant truly believing that the truth he was seeking was worth infinitely more than his own life.
And the physical horrors of this route, they were almost unimaginable. We're talking severe dehydration, trails that literally just vanished into the dunes. There were blinding sandstorms that would cause complete disorientation. And after the desert, then came the Pamir Mountains. The air is incredibly thin up there, and the temperatures are absolutely freezing. Honestly, it makes the absolute worst morning commute look like a luxurious vacation. Every single step over those mountains and through that sand tested his sheer endurance and his faith.
But here's the thing, he wasn't just walking through an empty wasteland. The Silk Road was this vibrant living network. Sure, it carried commerce, right? Silk, horses, spices, but far more importantly, it was a massive conduit for manuscripts, ideas, and religions. It was this vast, beating network of cultural and intellectual exchange linking China and India, and Song Yun basically became a vital thread in that web. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how his stops through places like Khotan, Udayana, and Gandhara proved the vast, transformative reach of the Buddhist teachings. These weren't just quick waypoints to rest at. They were incredibly rich centers of Buddhist art and scholarship. Every single stop proved to him that the spiritual ideas he was seeking had successfully shaped entire civilizations long before he even crossed into India proper.
But when he finally crossed over, the reality of his destination was pretty unexpected. Instead of finding this enlightened, peaceful utopia, Song Yun walked right into what historians call Huna-era turbulence. The once unified Gupta Empire, it was weakening. Northern regions were actively being shaken up by Huna invaders, so India wasn't necessarily in decline, but it was deeply fragmented and going through this massive transition.
And this context brings us to one of his absolute most critical historical observations, his encounter with Mihirakula, the son of Toramana. Song Yun provides incredibly rare, real-time evidence of this really formidable ruler who controlled parts of northwestern India.
Mihirakula is specifically remembered in Buddhist traditions for his deep hostility toward monasteries. And Songyun's eyewitness account of these struggles, it's literally a treasure trove for historians today trying to piece together this really dark era.
Yet, despite all that political chaos, the intellectual marvels he witnessed were staggering. You have to understand, Indian monasteries didn't just function as places of worship. They were the ancient world's global universities. They were schools of philosophy and logic, bustling centers of medicine and language. They housed massive libraries and even acted as international hostels. Monks from all across Asia studied there. He was looking at a thriving global intellectual network centuries before the modern university was even a concept.
He also carefully documented sacred relics, specifically objects believed to be the Buddhist tooth and hair. And these weren't merely dusty historical artifacts sitting on a shelf somewhere, they were the beating heart of a living faith. Whether you approach these accounts devotionally or purely from a historical perspective, these revered physical objects were incredibly powerful. They inspired vast networks of pilgrimage, massive patronage, and a really deep religious identity across all of Asia.
170. So the crucial point is that is the exact number of hand-copied Buddhist scriptures Songyun successfully carried back with him when he finally returned to China in 520 CE. Every single one of those 170 manuscripts was painstakingly hand-copied, carefully preserved, and manually carried over those deadly deserts and freezing mountain passes.
Let's move to and see how this builds. Looking at the sheer scale of this epic expedition, it took grueling months just to cross the mountains in the Taklamakan Desert. Then, for 4 years, from 518 to 522 CE, he witnesses and records Huna-era India firsthand. And finally, in 522 CE, he wraps up this incredible hero's journey, returning to China with knowledge that would go on to shape East Asian Buddhism for generations.
But here is the terrifying fragility of this entire legacy. The original travel account that Songyun actually wrote, it was completely lost to history. Gone. It doesn't exist anymore. It's kind of like carrying the world's most important data on a single thumb drive, losing it, but thankfully finding out someone had made a partial backup. The only reason we know any of his incredible observations today is because another author, Yang Xuanzi, preserved substantial excerpts of it in a text called the Luoyang Qilanji. Without that one preservation, this entire window into history would have vanished completely. No trace.
Which brings up a really intense question. What if he had failed, right? What if the desert or those freezing mountains had claimed him? If he had perished, those original scriptures would have been lost in the sands. The entire development of Chinese Buddhism could have unfolded in a completely different way. And historians today? We'd be left totally in the dark regarding a vital, incredibly turbulent era of Indian history. His sheer will to survive literally changed intellectual history forever.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought. Is the truest measure of a civilization found in the lands it conquers, or the perilous lengths it will go to preserve its wisdom? Songyun crossed continents and faced certain death, not to seize wealth, not for power, but purely to preserve understanding. It really makes you think about what we value today, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining me, and I really hope this sparks your curiosity to keep exploring.